She asked her assistant to marry her, just to keep her visa. But what if the fake marriage became the one thing she couldn't fake anymore? Claire Bennett had spent her entire life controlling everything: her career, her image, her emotions. Love was a weakness. Vulnerability, a luxury she couldn't afford. But when a denied visa threatens to erase the life she built, she does the unthinkable: proposes a marriage of convenience to the one man who's always been just a few feet away. Nathan Cole, her assistant. He's younger, annoying, always one joke too many, but also honest, steady, and suddenly, the only one who can help her stay. What starts as strategy quickly spirals into something much more complicated. A kiss for the cameras that lingers too long, a lie told in front of family that starts to feel like truth, and a heart that refuses to follow the rules. Can a relationship built on paperwork survive the fire of real emotions? And when love sneaks in through the back door, will they dare to open it? If you've ever wondered what happens when the line between fake and real begins to blur, this story is for you. Like, share, and subscribe to Shining Stories for more tales that start with a twist and end with something unforgettable. Now, let's begin. There are days that arrive like a storm, uninvited, uncontrollable, and completely unkind. That morning, Claire Bennett, 42, found herself staring out the window of her office on the 12th floor of Beacon Hill Media, trying to breathe through the quiet panic swelling inside her chest. Claire was the kind of woman who had spent decades mastering control of people, of projects, of herself. But now, it was slipping through her fingers like sand, because just a few minutes earlier, she had received a call. And in that short call, everything she'd built in the past 16 years was suddenly at risk. Her residency application had been denied. In less than 45 days, she would be forced to leave the country she had come to call home. As she placed the phone back on the desk, not slammed, but gently, as though it might explode, the door creaked open behind her. Claire. It was Nathan Cole, 32, her assistant, quick-witted, observant, always one step ahead. He took one look at her and knew something was very wrong. But before he could ask more, Claire turned to him and spoke with a calm that was anything but calm. "I need to get married." Nathan blinked slowly, as if her words were in a language he'd never heard before. Congratulations. Who's the lucky person?" Her answer came without hesitation. "You." He almost dropped the coffee in his hand. "I'm sorry." She stepped closer, voice steady, eyes focused, like she was pitching a business deal. "You're a citizen. You're not dating anyone. And you owe me for that Paris campaign I pulled you out of last year." Nathan shook his head, trying to process. Wait. You're asking me to marry you? As in, legally temporarily," she clarified, as if that made it sound more reasonable. "Just long enough for the paperwork to go through." He stared at her. "Claire, that's not a solution. That's a felony." "No. It's a strategy. One that could keep me from being deported." Nathan let out a short, dry laugh. "And you just expect me to sign up for that? Why not ask someone else?" "Because I trust you." She said it like it was obvious, like she hadn't just shattered every boundary they'd ever had. He rubbed his forehead. "You do realize people go to prison for this?" She crossed her arms. "Not if we do it right. They approve marriages like this all the time." He narrowed his eyes. "Real marriages. Not fake arrangements cooked up over panic and coffee." She stepped around her desk and stood in front of him. "Think about it. A few interviews, some paperwork, and in return, you get a big fat promotion." Nathan took a step back. "So that's the price: fake a marriage, and I get to climb the corporate ladder." Claire didn't flinch. "You hate being an assistant." "Nathan, You've said so yourself. He sighed, frustrated. You know what I hate more, being used? She tilted her head slightly. That's not what this is. He gave a bitter chuckle. Right. Because nothing says mutual respect like a transactional wedding. He turned to leave, but she wasn't done. Fine. Let's bargain. No. I'll cover your rent for a year. Still no. You can pick the office playlist. Nathan paused, slowly turned. Any genre? Yes. No. Still no. Claire was relentless. But Nathan only picked up his pace, his long strides carrying him down the corridor like he was trying to outrun a hurricane. Behind him, she muttered under her breath, arms folded, frustration simmering. Fine. I'll wear him down eventually. The next morning, Nathan sat at his desk, hands wrapped around a steaming mug, preparing for another battle of wits. The office was quiet, too quiet. And then he saw her. No high heels clicking with urgency. No cold, sharp commands. Just Claire, standing at his door, looking not like a CEO, but like someone who'd run out of walls to lean on. Nathan, she said softly, I need your help. He glanced up, suspicious. Wait. No yelling. No threats. What is this? An ambush. I'm being serious. He raised an eyebrow. Teasing. You just said serious. Hold on. I should check the sky. Is the world ending? She gave a weary sigh. He could see it in her face now. Behind all that control was something raw, human, vulnerable, and against every instinct, screaming run. Nathan stayed seated, stayed listening. He let out a slow breath. This is going to be a mess. Claire gave the smallest smile. Maybe. But at least it'll be a well-executed one. In that moment, Nathan questioned every decision that led him to this exact point. The next day, Nathan stood in front of Claire's desk, folder in hand, while she fired off instructions as if nothing had changed. Send that report to legal and set up a board meeting for the first Monday of next month, she said, not even glancing up from her screen. Nathan didn't budge. And maybe, sign this marriage application while you're at it. Claire finally looked up, her expression blank. Oh, right. That. I'll handle it by end of day. Nathan gave a dry chuckle. Unbelievable. I'm really doing this, aren't I? You are, she said, not missing a beat. But look at the bright side. You're officially part of a brilliant plan. He sank into the chair across from her. So, what's next in this circus act? Before she could reply, the phone rang. She answered, her voice suddenly precise, rehearsed. Claire Bennett speaking. A low, formal voice responded, This is Officer Daniels from the Department of Immigration. I'd like to schedule an interview regarding your case. Claire stiffened, but spoke evenly. Of course. Officer, how can we assist? Given the rapid nature of your marriage, he said, we'll need additional verification to confirm the relationship is legitimate. Nathan sat straighter, a knot forming in his stomach. Of course, Claire answered, her voice like ice wrapped in silk. We'll begin with a more intimate setting. We find it useful to observe couples around family. It helps our evaluation process. Nathan blinked. I'm sorry. What exactly does that mean? A weekend together, preferably somewhere meaningful. Mr. Cole's family home would be ideal. Claire's throat tightened. Is that necessary? Absolutely. Without such confirmation, the marriage could be deemed fraudulent with serious consequences. There was a pause. Claire looked at Nathan, panic behind her eyes. Nathan looked back half horrified, half amused. And, when would this need to happen? She asked carefully. This weekend. Nathan leaned back, a slow grin forming on his face. Well then, he said, clearly enjoying her discomfort. Guess we're going on a trip. Claire forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. Can't wait. As soon as the call ended, Claire turned slowly toward Nathan, her voice barely above a whisper. Your family's house. Are you serious? Nathan simply lifted his arms, like he had just won a negotiation. I agreed to your plan. Remember, you wanted it to look real. Well, there's nothing more real than a weekend with my family. Claire's stomach twisted. All right. Fine. Just tell me, what are they like? He gave a half smile, almost too innocent. My grandmother's a sweetheart. Parents harmless. My younger brother's still in college. Typical family stuff. Claire let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Okay. That sounds doable. But Nathan's grin widened a warning hidden in amusement. There's one tiny detail I forgot to mention. Claire narrowed her eyes. What detail? He leaned in slightly, voice casual. They don't think I'll ever get married. She blinked. Why they see me as the wanderer, the guy who never settles. So, us suddenly showing up together. Let's just say it'll raise a few eyebrows. Claire ran a hand over her face. Great. Just great. By Friday, they were standing in the terminal, waiting to board their flight. Claire clutched a neat rolling suitcase, dressed like she was headed to a conference. Nathan, in contrast, wore a relaxed smile and carried nothing but a weathered backpack. She looked him up and down. No suitcase. He shrugged. I've got stuff at the house. Claire tightened her grip on the suitcase. Of course you do. Typical. The flight was short and smooth. Aside from Claire catching herself glancing at Nathan now and then, he laughed too easily, especially at something on his phone. That annoyed her more than it should have. But it wasn't until the taxi ride into town that she started to feel off. Out the window. Signs flickered past. Cole and Sons, Fine Furnishings. The Cole Inn. A cozy cafe with a scripted sign that read, Founded by the Cole family. Claire narrowed her eyes. Nathan. Are you by any chance part of some local dynasty I should know about? He looked out the window with a small smile. Something like that. That's not an answer, she said, her suspicion growing. Relax. You'll see soon enough. But Claire didn't like surprises. And when the car finally turned the corner and pulled up in front of their destination, she stopped breathing. It wasn't a house. It was a mansion. An estate. Massive wrought iron gates flanked the entrance. The lawn looked like it had been trimmed with nail scissors. The windows stretched high and wide across 3 stories of perfectly aged stone. Claire stared, stunned. Nathan. Yeah. Are you rich? He gave a slow shrug. Let's just say, my family did all right. She looked at him like he had just grown wings. You've been working as my assistant. My assistant. For 2 years. And this was your reality. It's not pretending. He said, quietly, I needed to earn something that was mine, not theirs. Before Claire could respond, the grand front doors opened. A woman stepped out, silver hair set perfectly in place, posture straight as a ruler, eyes sharp as glass. Nathan, darling. He grinned. Hi, Grandma. He walked toward her, wrapping her in a warm embrace. Claire stood still, overwhelmed, trying to process the version of Nathan that had just emerged. Then, the woman turned her gaze to Claire, scanning, appraising, smiling with a knowing glint. So, you're the one who managed to tame my grandson. Claire forced a polite smile. Nice to meet you. I'm Claire. The woman looped her arm through Claire's without hesitation. Come, dear. Let's find out if you're everything he says you are. As they stepped inside the mansion together, Claire realized something unsettling. She had prepared herself for faking affection. She hadn't prepared for this. Claire had faced tough negotiations, hostile boardrooms, and flights across 5 time zones with no sleep. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared her for this. She wasn't sure what made her more nervous, spending an entire weekend under the same roof with strangers, or the fact that those strangers happened to be the family of a man she thought, up until yesterday, was just a coffee-fetching assistant. As they stepped past the grand double doors of the Cole estate, Claire tried to keep her steps measured, her expression polite, but inside, her thoughts were spiraling. He's not just an assistant. He's not even close. He's a millionaire. Nathan's grandmother, still gently linked with her arm, pulled her further into the vast hallway, like she was showcasing her newest prize. Come, sweetheart, the woman said with an eager smile. Let's spend some time together. I want to know everything. Claire threw a quick glance at Nathan, silently pleading for backup. He just offered a nonchalant shrug and a grin that said, "You're on your own." She was officially trapped. The inside of the house was like something out of a lifestyle magazine, gleaming marble floors, sweeping staircases, chandeliers dripping with crystal, and art that probably had security tags hidden behind them. Claire tried not to gape. She failed. In the center of the room stood a couple elegant, refined, and clearly waiting for their arrival. "Nathan," the woman called warmly, her voice smooth like old jazz. "Hi, Mom," he replied, pulling her into a hug. Claire stood awkwardly nearby, feeling like a background prop in someone else's movie. She still hadn't figured out how to process the fact that her assistant apparently had a last name that opened gates, not doors. Nathan's father stepped forward, shook his son's hand, then turned to her with a curious, evaluating look. "And you must be Claire." She nodded with a practiced smile. "Yes, it's a pleasure to meet you." His mother approached, taking both of Claire's hands in hers with surprising warmth. "Welcome to the family, dear." Before Claire could respond, she was swept into a soft, perfumed embrace. Nathan's grandmother watched, clearly pleased. "So," she said, folding her arms, "tell us everything. How did you two meet? And how did the proposal happen?" Claire's stomach twisted into a tight knot. They hadn't practiced this part. She shot a sideways glance at Nathan, praying he had something up his sleeve. Thankfully, he did. It all began at the office. He started, sounding like a man reciting a bedtime story. One day, I looked across the room and realized I never wanted to look at anyone else. Claire almost rolled her eyes but forced herself to nod, pretending to melt at the memory. The grandmother tilted her head. "Sweet. But tell me, how exactly did you pop the question?" Nathan didn't even flinch. "It was an evening dinner. Just the two of us. Candles. Flowers. Music in the background. I dropped to one knee and told her there was no one else I could imagine my life with." Claire's eyebrows rose slightly. Impressive improv. But then, he added with a mischievous sparkle, "She cried." Claire's mouth fell open. "I," cried. Nathan turned toward her, his tone smooth, from happiness. "It was beautiful." Claire smiled tightly. "So beautiful I can hardly remember a thing." Nathan's grandmother chuckled, though her gaze sharpened just a little. "Oh, is that how it happened? How very romantic." Her tone was pleasant, but there was something behind the words, like she was watching a chessboard. "Not a couple." Claire didn't like it. "Is there something wrong?" she asked, keeping her voice gentle but firm. "Not at all," the older woman replied. "I just enjoy seeing how much couples truly know each other. Claire felt it then, a warning in her bones. This was going to be the longest weekend of her life. After a few more introductions and an endless list of questions, Nathan's grandmother clapped her hands. "You must be exhausted. I had the guest room prepared for you both." Claire felt a wave of relief. A break. A door she could close. Finally. But the woman wasn't done. On second thought, she added, glancing between them, "You're married now, aren't you? Married couples share a room?" Claire's smile faded. Of course they did. The moment the words left the grandmother's lips, Claire felt her relief vanish like a puff of smoke. She turned to Nathan, silently begging him to speak up, to suggest an alternative, to say anything. But no, he just smiled. That infuriatingly amused smile. Like this was the most entertaining thing that had happened to him in months. "Oh, Grandma," he said sweetly, "we wouldn't want to be any trouble." The older woman gave him a look, one brow slightly raised. "Nonsense. Married couples share a room. Don't they?" Claire's throat tightened. "Yes, of course." "Perfect," the woman said, satisfied. "Your room is at the end of the hall." Claire stood frozen for a heartbeat. Maybe two. Panic crawled slowly up her spine. Should she freak out now, or wait until the door closed behind them? Nathan had already picked up their bags, completely unbothered, and started climbing the stairs. Claire followed, muttering under her breath, "This is getting out of control." He glanced over his shoulder. You knew it would be a challenge. A challenge she snapped. I expected suspicious looks. Maybe some awkward questions, not sleeping arrangements designed by an overzealous matchmaker. He only grinned. "Welcome to the family." When they stepped into the bedroom, Claire's eyes scanned the space. Soft lighting, earth-toned walls, antique furniture, and in the center of it all, one single bed. She stared at it like it had personally betrayed her. "Wonderful," she muttered. "Absolutely fantastic." Nathan tossed his backpack onto a chair and said casually, "We can share." Claire folded her arms. "You're sleeping on the floor." He arched an eyebrow. "I'm a gentleman, Claire, but I'm also a businessman. Let's make a deal." She gave him a glare. "Not happening." He smirked. "All right, then. I get the bed. You take the floor." Claire let out a slow breath. "Fine. We'll share. But you stay on your side. Do not cross the invisible line." He made a salute with 2 fingers. "Understood. I'll stay in my designated corner." That night, Claire lay stiffly under the blanket, her back to Nathan. She could hear him breathing. Calm. Unbothered. Like this was normal. How could he be so relaxed? Didn't this whole charade make him the least bit uncomfortable? She turned slightly, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. Maybe he saw this as a game. Something amusing. Something temporary. That idea made her chest tighten. The next morning, just as she managed to close her eyes again, a sharp knock broke the silence. She jolted upright, disoriented. Where was she? Then, everything hit her like a cold gust of wind. The mansion. The room. The fake marriage. Nathan. And the bed they had shared. She turned and found him still asleep, one arm thrown lazily off the side of the bed. The knocking returned, this time louder. "Claire, Nathan, time to get up!" came the familiar voice of his grandmother from the other side of the door. Claire's pulse spiked. "Nathan!" she hissed, poking his arm. "Get up!" He groaned. "Nathan, your grandmother is at the door." He opened his eyes slowly, blinking against the pale morning light. "And what if she walks in and sees us?" she whispered in horror. He yawned and offered the most infuriating sleepy smile she had ever seen. That would just confirm how madly in love we are. Claire glared at him. She had never wanted to throw a pillow so badly in her life. You don't take anything seriously, do you? Before Claire could fire back at Nathan's careless charm, the bedroom door swung open. No knock, no warning. Good morning. Lovebirds. Claire froze, mid-sentence. Nathan, on the other hand, slipped seamlessly into character. With one arm, he pulled her gently toward him, a picture-perfect grin on his face. Morning. Grandma. Claire forced a smile, stiff and strained. The older woman studied them for a moment, eyes twinkling with amusement. I trust you both had a good night's sleep. Claire nodded, her mouth dry. Absolutely. Couldn't have been better. Excellent. The grandmother beamed, clapping her hands once. We've got a full day ahead, and tonight, we're hosting a welcome dinner. Everyone's eager to meet the woman who captured my grandson's heart. Claire felt a bead of sweat slide down the back of her neck. Of course. That sounds lovely. I'll let you get dressed, the woman said, already halfway down the hallway. Join us for breakfast when you're ready. The door closed softly behind her. Claire instantly stepped back from Nathan and shot him a glare. Don't ever do that again. He raised an eyebrow, pretending innocence. Do what, wrap your arm around me like we're some fairy tale couple. He smirked. I was just making our story more believable. Claire shook her head and climbed out of bed. This is spiraling. Fast. Nathan stretched, completely unbothered. Relax. It's one dinner. With your entire family watching our every move, she snapped. And your grandmother just waiting for me to slip up? Then we won't slip up, he said simply. Claire stared at him. Pretending to be engaged was hard enough. Now I have to look like I'm head over heels for you. He winked. You'll do great. Claire wasn't so sure. After breakfast, Nathan's grandmother announced, with an all-too-sweet smile, that she wanted to spend the day with Claire. I'd love to get to know the future Mrs. Cole a little better. But Claire knew what that really meant. She was being tested. The first test began in the garden. The older woman handed Claire a pair of gloves and gestured toward a row of flowers. Nathan has always loved gardening. I imagine you two share that passion. Claire looked at the plants like they were aliens. Oh, yes. I love gardens. She lied, slipping on the gloves awkwardly. Wonderful, the woman said with a smile. Help me replant these. Claire crouched down, completely unsure of what she was doing. Within minutes, she'd broken one stem, buried another too deep, and covered her shoes in dirt. It was tragic. After a while, the grandmother paused and looked at her carefully. You really love my grandson, don't you? Claire felt her breath catch. It was a simple question, but it carried weight. She didn't want to hesitate, but her mouth dried. She glanced at Nathan in the distance, laughing with his father, looking far more relaxed than the version of him she knew at work. He looked different here. Softer. More real. Yes, she said finally. Very much. The woman tilted her head, and why Claire turned her gaze back toward him. Because he's good for me. It was all she could think to say. The grandmother gave a small, thoughtful smile. I hope that's true. The words weren't a blessing. They were a warning. Night crept in quickly. Claire slipped into a simple but elegant dress and descended the stairs with Nathan beside her. The main hall was filled with well-dressed strangers' friends, extended relatives, all here to meet her. She pasted on a smile, did her best to stay calm. But then she appeared, a tall, flawless blonde in a scarlet dress. Confident, calculated. Claire knew without being told this was the ex. Nathan. The woman purred as she approached. It's been a long time. Nathan gave a polite smile. Good to see you. Julia. Julia turned to Claire, giving her a slow, deliberate once-over. So, you're the one. Claire smiled back, but her jaw tightened. That's right. Julia tilted her head. Funny. Nathan never mentioned you. And just like that, the night took on a new level of tension. The words stung more than Claire expected. Julia's voice was sweet, but her tone was laced with a venom that chilled the air. Claire glanced sideways at Nathan. He remained composed, his expression unreadable. I prefer to keep my private life private, he said calmly. Julia smiled, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. How charming. But Claire, darling, how was the proposal? Claire inhaled slowly, her fingers tightening around the stem of her glass. They had rehearsed this part before, but repeating it now under this spotlight felt heavier somehow. It was magical, she said, forcing the words through a tight smile. Julia folded her arms. I want details. Before Claire could scramble for a story, Nathan stepped closer, one hand finding the small of her back. His presence was grounding, and suddenly, she wasn't alone in this. We've told that story too many times. He said gently, let's talk about something else. Julia tilted her head. Sure. Let's talk about how you gave up on real love to marry someone none of us even knew existed. Claire's stomach turned. This wasn't small talk. This was war. She took a long sip of wine to stall, to hide the burn in her chest. Julia turned fully to Nathan now. Tell me, Nathan, are you really in love? Silence? Claire's heart pounded. Nathan didn't respond. Not right away. Then, just as she began to panic, he did something entirely unexpected. He turned to her, gently placed a hand on her cheek, and kissed her. Not a polite kiss. Not one meant just for show. It was real. Or at least, it felt real. The noise around them faded. The room. The people. Even Julia's smug expression. Everything blurred except the warmth of his mouth, the steady touch of his hand, and the way his lips moved like he meant it. When Nathan finally pulled away, the air felt heavy, with something unspoken. Does that answer your question? He asked. Julia stood frozen, caught off guard. Claire, meanwhile, couldn't find her breath. She didn't know what to think anymore. What was rehearsed and what wasn't. And worse, she had kissed him back. As the conversations resumed and the music filled the space again, Claire's mind remained somewhere else entirely. She kept stealing glances at Nathan, and each time, the memory of the kiss came rushing back uninvited, undeniable. I need some air, she murmured, stepping away without waiting for a response. The balcony welcomed her with a cool wind, but it did little to settle the storm brewing inside. Then came a voice behind her. Familiar, steady, too calm, running away again. Claire closed her eyes, breathing in the quiet night before turning around. I just needed a moment without questions or stares. Nathan leaned against the railing beside her, arms crossed, amused. Then, I'll just stand here quietly, while you panic. I am not panicking. He arched a brow. You left the party mid-conversation. That's textbook panicking. Claire sighed. Nathan, what was that kiss? He smiled, and it only made her chest tighten further. Convincing. Wasn't it? She turned to him fully now, frustration blooming in her chest. Convincing. You kissed me like it. She stopped. She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't trust herself to. He didn't look away. Like it? What? He asked quietly. Claire swallowed. A lump formed in her throat. Like it was real. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the wind. Nathan's easy grin faded. His eyes darkened, just a little. And if it was, her heart skipped. The world seemed to narrow. Nathan. But he looked away and gave a quiet laugh, brushing it all off. Relax, Claire. I just wanted to shut Julia up. And if we're being honest, Nathan added with a grin, that kiss, brilliant move. Claire crossed her arms tightly, trying to ignore the strange mix of emotions twisting inside her: relief, embarrassment, and something else she refused to name. I should have punched you. Nathan chuckled. You still can. Though I imagine that would just convince everyone you're hopelessly in love with me. She exhaled sharply, ready with a comeback, when the sound of footsteps made them both turn. Nathan's grandmother stood in the doorway, arms folded, eyes sharp. Darlings, let's not stay out too long. No need to give anyone a reason to whisper. Claire managed a polite smile. We're coming. The older woman lingered a beat longer, then turned to Nathan. Show Claire the estate tomorrow, she said. It's time she understood what being part of this family truly means. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? Her smile never faltered. But there was a weight behind it. I'm sure. After all, she'll be a Cole soon. A cold ripple moved down Claire's spine. Nathan offered a half-hearted salute, a guided tour of the empire. Can't wait. Claire wasn't sure if the shiver that followed was from the night breeze, or something deeper. The following morning, after a breakfast filled with long stares and thin smiles, Nathan led Claire through town. He showed her the places that bore his family's name: luxury hotels, fine restaurants, and a gleaming office tower that rose above the others like a crown. Claire kept her pace steady, her voice neutral, but inside, she was reeling. I worked next to you for 3 years, she said as they passed another building marked with the Cole insignia. And you never mentioned any of this. Nathan slid his hands into his pockets. I didn't hide it. You just never asked. She gave him a sharp look. Oh, right. My mistake. I should have assumed my assistant came from a dynasty. He shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Most people change when they find out. You didn't. Claire tilted her head. That's because I already disliked you. Nathan stopped walking, looked at her. Deadpan. You treat me worse. She let out a dry laugh. Because you deserve it. He smirked. Exactly. That's what I've always liked about you. Claire didn't respond, but something in his words lingered. They walked in silence until they reached a lake tucked behind a grove of trees. The water shimmered under the late morning sun, and a wooden dock stretched gently out across its surface. Nathan leaned against one of the posts and gestured out toward the view. There it is. The final chapter of the tour. Claire folded her arms. I've learned that you're all absurdly wealthy. That's not the same as knowing you. He glanced over, curious. What do you want to know? She hesitated. Then, quieter. Why work under someone like me when you could live in a mansion doing absolutely nothing? Nathan's expression shifted. His eyes moved to the water, thoughtful. Because I needed to build something of my own. No shortcuts, no handouts. Just me. Claire blinked. She hadn't expected that. She studied him. The honesty in his voice. The way he didn't try to dress it up. That's admirable. He turned to her, eyes wide with mock surprise. Say that again. I want it framed. She rolled her eyes. Forget I said it. They stood in quiet for a while, the breeze soft against their faces. Then Nathan looked at her again, a glint in his eye. Can you swim? Claire frowned. Yes. Why you're not dressed for it? Obviously. Why? Before she could finish the sentence, he stepped forward, scooped her up in one fluid motion, and tossed her splash into the lake. Claire hit the cold water with a scream, flailing as she surfaced, soaked and sputtering. Nathan Cole. He was doubled over on the dock, laughing uncontrollably. "You're going to regret that," she shouted, water streaming down her face. Nathan just grinned, completely unrepentant. "I'm sure I will. I'm counting on it," Nathan said with a grin as Claire hauled herself out of the lake, soaked and fuming. Water dripped from her hair. Her dress clung awkwardly to her frame, and her shoes made squelching sounds with every step on the wooden pier. That was a mistake. "Cole," she muttered through gritted teeth. Nathan just laughed harder, the kind of deep, shameless laugh that made Claire want to throw something at him. So she did. She scooped up a handful of wet earth, thick and sticky, and launched it at his chest. It landed with a splatter, staining his perfect white shirt. He looked down in disbelief, then up at her eyes wide. Claire crossed her arms triumphantly, still laughing. There was a pause. Then, with no warning at all, Nathan lunged forward, slipping into the mud and pulling her down with him. They tumbled onto the grass like two teenagers who'd never learned to take life seriously. For a few minutes, the tension disappeared, and they simply laughed. And in that unguarded moment, Claire realized something that frightened her more than any fake engagement or suspicious grandmother. She was having fun. Real fun. And worse, Nathan Cole was starting to feel real too. Later, they trudged up the grand steps of the mansion like two drenched ghosts, soaked, muddy, and completely out of place. Claire's hair clung to her face. Her once elegant dress was ruined, but Nathan looked ridiculously pleased with himself, as if chaos had been his goal all along. "That was incredible," he said, holding the door for her with a teasing grin. "If your definition of fun includes ruining dresses and public humiliation, then sure. Best day ever," she grumbled. As soon as they stepped into the foyer, the room fell silent. Gasps echoed. Conversations halted. Standing in front of them were Nathan's mother, his stoic father, his sharp-eyed grandmother, and naturally Julia. Arms crossed, a smirk already forming. "Nathan!" his mother exclaimed, horrified. His grandmother narrowed her eyes. What on earth happened to you two before Claire could string together a believable excuse? Nathan flashed that trademark grin. "We were just spending time together." "In the mud?" his grandmother asked, her tone icier than the lake they'd just left. Nathan shrugged. "Love takes us to unexpected places." Claire wanted to melt into the floor. Julia, of course, leaned forward with a smug expression. "You two certainly know how to make an entrance." Claire managed a thin smile. "That's right. We're passionately in love." Nathan's grandmother didn't reply. She simply stared at Claire for a beat too long, then turned and walked away with a quiet, His father cleared his throat. "Go get cleaned up. We have an important dinner tonight." Claire felt her stomach twist. Another dinner. Another round of questions. Another stage to pretend. Upstairs. She shut the bathroom door and leaned over the sink. The mirror showed a version of herself she barely recognized. Flushed cheeks, wind-tangled hair, eyes that weren't just tired, but conflicted. This wasn't just pretend anymore. That was the danger. After a long, hot shower, Claire slipped into a black dress that was elegant yet safe. She smoothed the fabric over her sides, took one last breath, and descended the stairs. Laughter and clinking glasses drifted from the dining room. When she entered, every conversation halted. Every eye turned toward her. The table gleamed with silverware polished to perfection, crystal glasses reflecting the golden chandelier light. It was all so exact, like a scene from a high society film. Nathan stood near the head of the room, dressed in a charcoal suit that fit him like it had been made for this very evening. And right beside him, almost too close, was Julia. Still beautiful. Still watching. Still a threat. Claire walked into the dining room with practiced poise, but her chest felt tight. The chandelier cast warm gold over the table, and conversations buzzed softly until she spotted Julia beside Nathan. Without a second thought, Claire crossed the room, her heels silent on the polished floor. She reached for Nathan's hand and interlaced her fingers with his, her smile bright but sharp. "Hi, darling," she said, her voice honeyed. Nathan blinked, surprised, but only for a moment. He caught on quickly. "Hey, love." Claire leaned in and placed a gentle kiss on his cheek, slow, deliberate, just long enough for Julia to catch every detail. Julia narrowed her eyes. "You two are just precious," she said, voice dripping with insincerity. Nathan, of course, played right along. "Thank you." Julia. "Isn't it wild when love sneaks up on you?" Julia's grip on her wineglass tightened, and for a second, Claire wondered if the stem might snap. She didn't care. For once, she felt like she'd won something. During the dinner, Claire sat beside Nathan, their hands still linked. The perfect image of affection. She could feel eyes on them, especially from across the table. Nathan's grandmother watched everything like a hawk dressed in pearls. Then, with a soft but deliberate tap on the crystal goblet, she cleared her throat. "I'd like to offer a toast," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "To the happy couple." Claire's stomach tensed. She raised her glass with everyone else, though her fingers trembled ever so slightly. This wasn't just a gesture. This was another test. "Nathan," the older woman continued, eyes fixed on him, "why don't you tell us the exact moment you realized you were in love with Claire?" Claire nearly coughed into her wine. That hadn't been part of their script. She turned to Nathan, searching for a sign of hesitation, but there wasn't any. His eyes softened. His tone lowered. "It was the day she walked into my office and told me she needed me." Claire's breath caught in her throat. "That was the moment I knew." He continued, still looking only at her, because something in her voice made me realize I would do anything for her. His words wrapped around her like a secret. Too sincere. Too personal. And, technically, not a lie. The grandmother's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes glimmered. "How beautiful," she whispered. Julia rolled her eyes and drowned her irritation in another sip of wine. The evening carried on more toasts, more conversation, but Claire could hardly taste the food. Her heart wasn't in the act anymore, because for the first time, she wasn't sure if Nathan was pretending. After the guests had thinned out and laughter echoed softly from another room, Nathan gently took Claire's hand and guided her into a quiet hallway. "You all right?" he asked. She blinked. "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" He leaned against the wall, one brow raised. "Because you looked at me like I meant what I said back there." Claire hesitated. Her mouth opened, but no response came. Because it had meant something. That realization unnerved her more than anything. "Nathan," she whispered, "we need to be careful." "Careful," he repeated. About what he stepped closer, close enough for her to feel his breath, the steady warmth radiating from his presence. "About this," she said, her voice barely audible. He studied her face, then asked, "Be honest. Are you still sure this is all just a game?" She tried to answer. She really did. But for the first time, there was no script, and no certainty. Nathan reached up, his touch feather-light as he brushed his fingers across her cheek. "When you figure it out," he said gently, "come find me." Then he turned and walked away. Claire stood there, frozen, the echoes of his words ringing louder than any toast or applause. The game had changed. That night, sleep wouldn't come. She lay awake, tangled in her sheets, trying to forget the way his eyes had searched hers, the way his fingers had lingered on her skin, not like someone playing a role, but like someone who truly saw her. And the worst part, she didn't want to forget it. Claire had always been good at keeping lines clear. Work stayed in its corner. Emotions stayed far away. Her career had been her fortress. And love, if it ever showed up, was a visitor that never got past the gate. But now, it was as if every rule she'd written for herself was being rewritten. By Nathan Cole. When dawnlight began to trickle through the bedroom window, Claire gave up pretending to sleep. She sat up, wrapped a robe around her shoulders, and walked to the bathroom. She splashed cold water on her face and stared at the mirror. Really stared. "You just have to survive this weekend," she whispered to herself. "Then everything goes back to normal." But somehow, the thought didn't comfort her like it used to. Dressed and determined, she made her way to the dining room, and there it was, the very last thing she wanted to see. Nathan, already seated, and across from him, Julia. Perfect. Claire straightened her shoulders and stepped forward, voice calm, but firm. "Good morning." Nathan turned toward her with a smile that was way too cheerful. "Morning. Did you sleep okay?" She forced a polite smile. "Best night of my life." Julia lifted her cup with a smile that could slice glass. "I was just saying how surprised I am to hear about the engagement. Nathan always said he wasn't the type to settle." Claire sat down, crossed her legs, and picked up her coffee. "Well, people change." Julia tilted her head, her eyes like sharp needles. "Do they? Or do they just fake it really well?" The challenge hung in the air. Before Claire could reply, Nathan's hand slid over hers, warm, steady, firm. Their fingers intertwined on the table like it was second nature. "I've changed," he said, his voice low. Claire didn't move, because for the first time, it didn't sound like a performance. The rest of breakfast crawled by, filled with quiet tension. Julia didn't hold back on her subtle barbs, and Claire fought to keep her expression neutral, despite how clearly she could still feel the pressure of Nathan's hand on hers. But just when she thought it couldn't get more uncomfortable, his grandmother appeared, looking suspiciously pleased. "My dear ones," she said, settling herself at the head of the table. "I have a little surprise." Claire tensed. What kind of surprise, she asked carefully. The older woman's eyes sparkled with mischief. "I think it's time we made this union official. Before you head back to the city." Claire's fork slipped from her hand and clattered against her plate. "I'm sorry, what?" The grandmother took a calm sip of tea, as if she'd just mentioned the weather. "A wedding. Tonight. Something small. Just family." Claire felt the blood drain from her face. A wedding," she echoed. The woman nodded. "Yes. You're already engaged. Why delay something that's clearly meant to be?" Claire looked at Nathan, silently pleading for him to intervene. But instead of stepping in, he seemed almost entertained. "Well, sweetheart," the grandmother said sweetly, "shall we begin the preparations?" Claire forced a smile so tight it hurt. I'd love to. But weddings take time. I'd want it to be perfect." The older woman waved a hand, dismissive and decisive. "Leave that to me. You just be ready." Claire wanted the ground to open up and swallow her whole. There was no way out of this without suspicion, and going through with it meant taking this lie far further than she ever intended. By midday, the house was in chaos. Staff ran back and forth. Chairs were carried out into the garden. White flowers were arranged under a wrought iron arch. Someone even brought out a string quartet. And through it all, Claire stood frozen in place, watching as her fake wedding day came to life before her eyes. She was officially trapped. Somewhere upstairs, someone was picking out a gown for Claire. Meanwhile, Claire herself felt like she was slipping further into a place she didn't recognize, a space where reality bent with every passing hour. By mid-afternoon, she found Nathan sitting in the study, casually flipping through a newspaper like it was just any other day. She stood at the doorway, arms crossed, voice sharp. "Are you seriously not going to say anything about this?" Nathan looked up, calm as ever. "About what?" Claire nearly threw the cushion at his head. "Your grandmother is planning an actual wedding." He folded the paper neatly and stood up, crossing the room without the slightest trace of alarm. "And that changes what?" "Exactly?" he asked. Claire stared at him. "You can't be serious." "I am, because no matter what happens tonight, you'll go back to your world. I'll go back to mine." His words were steady, but they didn't settle her. Because deep down, she wasn't sure they were true anymore. And worse, she wasn't sure she wanted them to be. Hours later, Claire stood in front of a tall mirror in her room, draped in a gown of soft white fabric and delicate lace. It was far too elegant for something pretend. She looked like a bride, and for the first time since this all began, the idea of marrying Nathan Cole didn't feel ridiculous. It felt terrifying, because it didn't feel fake anymore. She took a breath she didn't fully believe in, and stepped into the hallway. Downstairs, the garden had transformed. Rows of chairs lined a stone path. White candles flickered in the golden light. Flowers wrapped around an iron arch that stood at the center, and waiting beneath it, in a sharp tailored suit and an unreadable expression, was Nathan. As Claire walked down the path, she felt the ground shift under her with every step. Her heart beat faster. She had no idea where the lie ended and the truth began. Nathan smiled when she reached him, and it was all she could do not to fall. This wasn't acting anymore. This was something else. The efficient, kind-faced, and gentle gave them a warm nod. "Nathan, would you like to say a few words?" Claire's breath caught. Nathan turned to her, took her hand, and looked straight into her eyes. His voice was steady, quiet, raw. "I never believed in love," he began. Claire's heart skipped. "Not really. I used to think it was just a word. Something people leaned on when logic failed. The guests were still listening. But then I met you," he said, "and you turned everything I thought I knew into dust. Suddenly, I wanted to show up. I wanted to try, even when it didn't make sense." Claire tried to remember that this was all scripted, but there had never been a script like this. "Being with you," Nathan continued, "made me realize that love doesn't always come when it's convenient or expected. It just comes, and when it does, it doesn't ask for permission." Silence blanketed the garden. Claire could hardly breathe, because the words were too perfect, too dangerous, too real. Then, the officiant turned to her. "Claire, would you like to say a few words?" She blinked once, twice, trying to pull herself back to the surface. Every face was turned toward her. Nathan's grandmother looked on with a satisfied smile. Julia stood a few rows back, her arms crossed, her glare piercing. Claire opened her mouth, but nothing came. Then, somewhere in the blur, she remembered Claire stood still under the arch, surrounded by soft candlelight and the quiet rustle of evening breeze. And suddenly, she remembered how Nathan used to drive her mad with his sarcasm at work, how he always found a way to get under her skin, always one comment too clever, one smile too smug. But she also remembered how, since this strange act began, he had made her laugh more than anyone else ever had. How, just last night, He had held her like he meant it. How his eyes searched hers like she mattered. How his presence was starting to slip under every wall she'd ever built. She swallowed hard, and then, in front of everyone, she said the only thing she could. "You make me question everything." Nathan's brows lifted, his surprise visible, but he didn't look away. "I never thought a lie could feel so real." She continued, her voice trembling at the edges. "But somehow, you made it real." He squeezed her hand gently, and her chest tightened in response. The officiant smiled. "Nathan Cole, do you take Claire Bennett as your lawful wife?" There wasn't a second of hesitation. "I do." A chill spread through Claire's body. The officiant turned to her. "And you, Claire Bennett, do you take Nathan Cole as your lawful husband?" Her pulse thundered in her ears. Every voice, every guest, every flickering candle faded into silence. "I do." Applause rose around them like a wave. But Claire didn't hear any of it. Her entire world had narrowed to the man standing before her. Nathan stepped closer, cupped her face with both hands, and kissed her. Not for show, not for the crowd. It was slower, warmer, something else entirely. And that scared her. Because for the first time, nothing about this felt like a performance. Dinner followed the ceremony. The garden glowed with string lights. Laughter, clinking glasses, and conversation filled the air. Claire played the role. She smiled. She answered questions. She thanked guests for their kind words. But inside, her mind was unraveling. Nathan was no longer a character in a fake story. He was becoming real. And that was a problem she didn't know how to solve. She slipped inside for a breath of quiet. But someone followed. "You really think everyone bought this, don't you?" Claire turned, her expression flattening as Julia appeared from the shadows. Arms crossed, voice like frost. "I'm not in the mood." "Julia." "Oh, but you will be." Julia stepped forward, her eyes sharp. "I know this is all an act." Claire didn't flinch. "I don't know what you're talking about." Julia let out a hollow laugh. "Nathan never wanted marriage. Never even talked about it. And now, he shows up with you. Please." Claire kept her voice steady. "People grow. Things change." Julia leaned closer. "I'm going to find out what's really going on." Claire smiled soft. "Cool. Good luck with that." Then she walked away without looking back. But as her heels echoed down the hallway, her heart beat faster. Because Julia wasn't wrong, and the line between truth and fiction was getting harder to find. Much later that night, Claire finally escaped to her room. Her limbs ached with exhaustion, and her heart was tired from pretending. But before she could even lie down, the door creaked open. It was Nathan. "Claire," he said gently. She didn't look at him. "I'm exhausted. Please, I just want to sleep." He stepped inside anyway, closing the door behind him. His voice was quiet, but insistent. "We need to talk." She rubbed her face, worn thin. About what? He took a step closer. "About this. About whatever is happening between us." Her chest tightened. "There's nothing happening." He gave a soft, almost bitter laugh. "No." "Then look me in the eye and tell me that what you felt today during the wedding was all fake." She opened her mouth, but no words came. And Nathan stepped forward again. Nathan took another step toward her, close enough for Claire to catch the soft trace of his cologne, warm, steady, familiar. "Tell me the truth, Claire," he said gently. "Was it all just pretend?" She held her breath, because if she gave him an answer, she would have to face something she wasn't ready to admit. And deep down, she wasn't sure she could still tell the difference between what was real and what was performance. Nathan reached out, brushing his fingers along her cheek with a tenderness that made her chest ache. "If you can honestly tell me none of it meant anything," he whispered, "I'll stop. I'll walk away." Her entire body tensed. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Nathan gave her a small, knowing smile. Not arrogant. Not smug. Just quiet understanding. "I thought so." Then, without another word, he turned and left the room, closing the door softly behind him. Claire sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, burying her face in her hands. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't supposed to feel like this. But it did. And now, there was no undoing it. The next morning, Claire woke with a strange feeling, as if something inside her had quietly shifted during the night. Maybe it was the way Nathan had looked at her before he walked out. Maybe it was the words he'd said, or the ones she couldn't say in return. She stared at the ceiling for a while, her pulse unsteady, her thoughts a tangled blur. She didn't want to go downstairs. She didn't want to see him. But avoiding him wouldn't change anything. After getting dressed, she finally made her way to the living room. The house was already alive with movement staff hurrying from room to room, voices overlapping. The Cole family gathered casually, discussing the day's plans. And Nathan, he was seated comfortably on the couch, coffee in hand, perfectly composed, as if nothing had happened. When his eyes met hers, he offered a slight smile. "Sleep all right?" he asked. Claire hesitated. The question was simple, but the way he said it, not so much. "Yes," she replied quietly. It was a lie. Before she could say more, his grandmother stood and clapped her hands together. As everyone knows, she began, her voice full of ceremony. "Tonight is the annual Cole family ball. A long-standing tradition made even more special this year, thanks to our newest married couple." Claire felt a chill dance down her spine. "A ball," she repeated, her voice nearly catching. Nathan glanced at her with a twinkle of amusement in his eyes, clearly enjoying the moment. "Oh, right," she said quickly, pasting on a smile. "That sounds lovely." But inside, she was already unraveling. It wasn't enough that she'd survived a fake wedding. Now she had to waltz around a ballroom playing the perfect, adoring wife under the scrutiny of dozens of sharp eyes, including Julia's. Claire caught sight of her across the room, sitting in silence, a slow, knowing smile creeping onto her face. "Wonderful." Claire turned to Nathan, her voice low. "You could have given me a heads up." "And missed that look on your face," he replied, sipping his coffee. "Never." She folded her arms. "You enjoy this way too much." He just grinned, unapologetic. Later that evening, Claire stood in her room, adjusting the dress that had been selected for her. It was long, dark sapphire, with a graceful neckline and a silhouette that made her feel like someone else, someone who belonged beside a man like Nathan Cole. And maybe that's what unsettled her most, because when she looked in the mirror, the illusion didn't feel like an illusion anymore. When she finally came down the stairs, the house had been transformed. And at the entrance, waiting for her, was Nathan. He wore a black suit tailored to perfection, understated, impeccable. But what made her pulse stutter was the way his expression shifted when he saw her. Just for a moment, his eyes lit up like the world had narrowed to just her. And in that second, Claire forgot it was all pretend. "You look incredible," Nathan said, his voice low, sincere, no sarcasm, no teasing. Claire paused, caught off guard. She felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You don't look too bad yourself," she replied, trying to sound casual, but even she could hear the softness in her tone. He let out a quiet laugh and offered his arm. "Shall we?" She hesitated. but only for a second, then slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow. The ballroom shimmered with golden light. Crystal chandeliers cast reflections like stars across the marble floor. Every table, every flower arrangement, every thread in the velvet drapes screamed luxury. Claire had never been in a place like this. And the moment they stepped inside, the room turned. Dozens of eyes locked onto them. Murmurs spread like wildfire. The sudden wedding, the mystery bride, the story that didn't quite add up. Claire held her head high, posture perfect, but her pulse raced. Then Nathan took her hand, and the whispers faded into the background. For the first time that evening, she felt something close to calm. As the night unfolded, Nathan moved through the crowd effortlessly, introducing her as his wife, keeping her close, fingers brushing hers now and then, like it meant nothing. But to Claire, it meant everything. The unsettling part. It all felt natural. And then came the moment she dreaded. His grandmother stepped forward with a proud smile and declared, "It's time for the newlyweds to open the floor." Claire's stomach dropped. Nathan leaned in and whispered, "Do you dance? I pretend to." She murmured. "Perfect," he said with a smile. "Pretend with me." She placed her hand in his, and he led her to the center of the room. The music began slow, classical, elegant. He wrapped one arm around her waist and guided her across the floor like it was the most effortless thing in the world. At first, she was stiff, every muscle tense, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, her body started to follow his. She let go, just a little. The room blurred, the music swelled, and then Nathan leaned in again and whispered, "You look beautiful tonight." A shiver ran through her. She looked up at him, expecting him to smirk. But he didn't. He held her gaze, steady and soft. Then, right there in the center of the room, he did something she hadn't anticipated. He kissed her. There was no audience to fool, no reason to pretend anymore. It was just them. And the kiss wasn't a show. It was slow, intentional, real. His hand cupped her cheek, fingers warm against her skin, like he wanted to make sure she felt every second of it. And the worst part, she didn't want him to stop. When he finally pulled away, the room came rushing back, but Claire wasn't the same. She couldn't tell where the lie ended and the truth began anymore. Nathan gave her a quiet smile. Was that convincing enough? Claire couldn't speak. Because she knew it hadn't been fake. And that was the most dangerous part. The evening continued, full of toasts and applause and laughter, but Claire heard none of it. She was still back in that moment. That kiss, that look. Whatever had just happened between them, it wasn't part of the plan. She had felt it, and she knew he had too. But then, a familiar voice cut through the buzz of the ballroom. "Well," Julia said, arms crossed, tone sharp. That was quite the performance. Claire stiffened. "What do you want?" "Julia." The blonde tilted her head, smile cutting. "Oh, nothing. Just curious." Claire narrowed her eyes. "If this is real," Julia continued, stepping closer, "then why was I the one to find out about the marriage? By accident. Why has Nathan never once mentioned you before?" Claire forced her tone to stay calm. "We value our privacy." Julia took one more step forward, eyes glinting. "Or maybe," she whispered, "you just don't have a real story to tell." And with that, Claire realized just how close Julia was to uncovering the truth. In that moment, Claire realized the time she had left to keep this illusion alive was slipping away fast. Her whole body stiffened as she faced Julia. The blonde's gaze was sharp, calculating like a predator circling, waiting for the slightest misstep. Claire forced a steady breath. "Why are you so fascinated by our relationship?" she asked calmly. though her voice trembled at the edges. Julia smiled, slow and assured, as if she'd been waiting for that question. Because none of it adds up. Claire said nothing. Nathan never talked about marriage. Julia continued, never even hinted he was seeing someone. And now, suddenly, he has the perfect wife. No one even knew you existed before this weekend. Don't you think that's strange? Claire kept her expression composed, even as panic throbbed beneath her skin. People change, she said. Julia folded her arms. Sure, but not overnight. Claire opened her mouth to answer, but before she could form a word, she felt a familiar warmth at her waist. Nathan had appeared, slipping in beside her like he had been watching all along. Is there a problem here? He asked smoothly. His tone light, but unmistakably firm. Julia's eyes narrowed, but she kept her smile intact. We were just chatting. Nathan took Claire's hand, intertwining their fingers. If you have questions, Julia, I'd prefer you bring them to me directly. Julia let out a dry, humorless laugh. Oh, Nathan, I've always understood you better than anyone. Isn't that right? Claire felt something strange flare in her chest, hot and sharp. Not fear, not anxiety, jealousy. Before Julia could press further, Nathan turned to Claire. Want to take a walk? Claire nodded, grateful for the escape. He led her gently out of the ballroom, through a side door that opened onto the terrace. The cold night air brushed against her skin like a wake-up call. She leaned against the railing, eyes scanning the darkened sky. I think she's going to figure it out, she whispered. Nathan didn't answer right away. He just stood beside her, watching her quietly. Claire closed her eyes. This wasn't supposed to get this far. There was silence, except for the wind and the distant hum of music still playing inside. I know, Nathan said softly. Claire turned to look at him. His face was unreadable, but there was something different in his eyes, something unspoken. The memory of the ceremony flashed back through her mind. The flowers, the candlelight, the way he looked at her when he spoke. I never believed in love. Until I met you. She had told herself it was all for show. Every word, every glance. But when he said those words, she believed him. And that was what scared her the most. The weight of it settled over her again. How real everything had started to feel. The way her palms had gone clammy as she stood beside him. The way her heart refused to slow down. The way he held her hand, like it was something precious. The officiant's voice, though calm and steady, had sounded distant, like an echo in a dream. And then it had come. Would you like to say a few words to your bride? Nathan had turned to her, taken her hand, and looked at her as if no one else existed. His words had been simple, honest, disarming. I never believed in love, he had said. And Claire remembered blinking, frozen, until I met you. A hush had fallen over the garden, and for the first time, Claire had believed it, even if she shouldn't have. Because when lies start to feel like truth, everything becomes dangerous. I never believed in love. Nathan began, his voice soft, carrying across the garden like a secret meant only for her. A shiver ran down Claire's spine. I always thought love was just a word, an excuse people used when they didn't want to admit they were afraid to be alone. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat louder than the last. But then, he said, pausing just enough to look directly into her eyes, I met you. Claire fought to remind herself that this was all a performance, a beautiful, elaborate lie. But Nathan's words didn't sound like lies. They sounded like truth. Some things, he continued, just happen, without warning, without logic, without asking permission. And suddenly, everything you thought you knew doesn't matter anymore. Silence fell over the garden. Claire felt weightless, untethered from reality. She had no idea where the story ended and where the truth began. The officiant turned toward her. "Claire, would you like to say a few words?" She blinked slowly, trying to clear her thoughts. All eyes were on her Nathan's family, his grandmother's approving smile, and Julia's sharp stare, arms crossed tightly. Claire looked at Nathan, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just him. She remembered. She remembered every sarcastic comment he made at the office, every time he tested her patience. She remembered how, somehow, he always made her laugh, even when she didn't want to. She remembered the way he held her the night before, how his presence calmed something restless inside her. And before she could stop herself, the words slipped out. "You make me question everything." Nathan's eyebrows lifted slightly in surprise. "I never imagined a lie could feel like this," she continued, voice trembling. "But somehow, you made it feel real." Nathan squeezed her hand gently, and the ache in Claire's chest deepened. The officiant smiled. "Nathan Cole, do you take Claire Bennett as your lawful wife?" Nathan didn't blink. "I do." Claire felt her entire body tense. "And do you, Claire Bennett, take Nathan Cole as your lawful husband?" Her pulse thundered. "I do," she whispered. Applause erupted around them, but Claire didn't hear any of it. All she could hear was the roar of her own thoughts. Nathan reached up and gently cupped her face, and then he kissed her. Not for show, not for the guests. This kiss was different. It was slow, intimate, quiet. It didn't demand anything. It simply said, "This is real now." Claire felt the ground vanish beneath her feet, and for the first time, she was truly afraid because something that wasn't supposed to be real was becoming the one thing she couldn't let go of. Dinner followed the ceremony. The garden shimmered with lights. The guests chatted excitedly, clinking glasses and congratulating them both. Claire smiled. She answered politely, but her mind, it was chaos. Because Nathan wasn't a problem she could solve with logic. He was starting to feel real. Too real. As she stepped inside the house for a moment of air, a voice cut through the quiet. "You really think you fooled everyone, don't you?" Claire turned, and of course, it was Julia. She didn't hide her exhaustion. "Julia, not now." "Oh, but I think now is perfect," Julia said, folding her arms. "Because I know none of this is real." A chill crept through Claire's spine. She said nothing. "I don't buy it." Julia pressed. "The sudden marriage, the perfect speeches, the looks, it's too clean, too practiced." Claire took a breath. "The only way this falls apart is if we let it." Julia smirked. "Is that what you're afraid of? That someone might see the cracks?" Claire turned to leave. But Julia's last words hit hard. "Or maybe," she said with a shrug, "you're afraid because part of you actually wants it to be real." Claire paused. Behind her, she felt the presence she'd hoped for and feared. Nathan stepped into the room. "What's bothering you more?" he asked softly. "That Julia's suspicious?" He paused. "Or that you're starting to like this?" Claire's stomach dropped. She looked up, ready to fire back. But Nathan had already taken a step closer. Nathan stepped closer. The air between them suddenly too full, too still. "You can pretend all you want, Claire," he said quietly. "But everything's changed." She crossed her arms in defense, trying to summon the distance she used to rely on. "You're imagining things." Nathan tilted his head, his expression soft but unwavering. "Then look me in the eyes and tell me that kiss was just acting." Claire parted her lips, then closed them again. The words wouldn't come, because she knew the truth, even if she couldn't say it. Nathan reached out, brushing his fingers gently along her cheek, the touch so careful it broke something inside her. "If this is still just a performance," he murmured, "say it now, and I'll walk away." Her heart thundered in her chest. This was her chance to end it, to rebuild the walls, to run. But she said nothing. And that silence was all the answer he needed. He cupped her face with both hands and kissed her. No audience, no spotlight, no roles to play, just him and her. And Claire was completely lost. She reached for him instinctively, letting herself fall into the warmth, into the truth she wasn't ready to admit. Nothing mattered in that moment, nothing but that kiss. When they finally pulled apart, Nathan's gaze held something deeper, something unspoken. "You're scared," he whispered. Claire looked away. This wasn't supposed to happen. He brushed a hand gently to the back of her neck, but it did. She closed her eyes. "Nathan." Before she could finish, a sharp voice cut through the quiet. "Well, that explains a lot." They both turned. Julia stood just inside the doorway, arms folded, lips curled into a smug smile. Claire's stomach twisted. Julia stepped forward, voice laced with mock sweetness. "So this is what true love looks like. Tension, secrets, lies." Claire tried to respond, but her thoughts were spinning. Julia laughed softly. "Don't worry. I don't need to expose anything. It's all unraveling on its own." Then her gaze shifted sharp, curious, directly at Nathan. "But what's most interesting is that you, Nathan, don't seem to be pretending anymore." He didn't reply, and that silence, that was enough for Julia to smirk, turn, and disappear back into the night. Claire stood frozen, her pulse racing, because for the first time, the lie no longer fit, and the terrifying truth she didn't want it to. "This isn't what you think," she whispered, barely able to meet Nathan's eyes. His voice was low. "Then look at me, and tell me you don't feel the same." Claire opened her mouth, but nothing came, because she did feel the same. She was in love, but saying it would change everything. "I need time," was all she managed, her voice unsteady. And then she turned and walked away, heart pounding, legs barely carrying her. The days that followed were a blur. They returned to the city. Claire buried herself in work, pretending to be the version of herself she used to know. But inside, everything had collapsed. She missed him, the smirks, the shared silences, the way he saw her without effort. She missed the way he made her feel alive. Then one morning, Nathan didn't show up to work. She told herself it didn't matter. But as the hours passed, the silence grew heavier, unbearable. And then the message came. He'd resigned. Claire stared at the note in disbelief, her world tilting beneath her feet. Before she could think, she grabbed her bag and ran from the building. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she had to find him. She had to stop running. She drove to his apartment, breath caught in her throat. But when she asked the doorman, he shook his head gently. "Nathan left this morning," he said, packed up, said he wouldn't be coming back. And just like that, Claire realized the one person she had pushed away might really be gone. Panic turned into desperation. Claire tried calling Nathan, once, twice, over and over. No answer. That's when the truth hit her. She might lose him. For good. And that was something she could never accept. So she did the only thing her heart begged her to do. She went after him, using what little information she had. Claire pieced the clues together: his absence, the sudden resignation, the silence, and finally discovered where he'd gone. The airport. A flight to Europe? One way. By the time she arrived, he was already at the departure gate, suitcase in hand, and right there, surrounded by strangers, announcements echoing, footsteps shuffling. Claire did something she never imagined she would. She called his name. Nathan. He stopped, turned, and when his eyes found hers, they widened in disbelief. Claire walked toward him, her heart pounding, her voice shaking. "I'm a coward," she said aloud, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I ran because I didn't know how to handle this. I didn't know how to handle love." People began to turn, to watch. But Claire didn't care. Her eyes never left his. "But now I do," she said, her voice cracking. "Because I finally realized I love you." Nathan didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He dropped his suitcase and began walking, then running straight to her. They met in the middle of the terminal, and when he reached her, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her. Right there, in front of everyone. But none of that mattered, because for the first time, there was no lie left between them, no plan, no pretending, just love. When they finally pulled apart, Nathan cradled her face in his hands, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was just waiting for you to say it." Claire let out a shaky laugh, breathless. And now he smiled. "Now, we do this the right way." She nodded, her heart racing, still stunned at what she had just done. Had she really chased him down at the airport? Declared her love in front of complete strangers? Yes. Yes. She had. And now she was in his arms, breathing in the scent she'd memorized without realizing it, feeling the lips she once thought were just part of a script. But they never were. Nathan brushed her cheek with his thumb, eyes full of something raw and open. "Claire Bennett," he said softly, "you just gave me the biggest surprise of my life." She smiled through tears. "You taught me how to stop playing it safe." He stepped back slightly, slipping a hand into his pocket. "I think it's only fair. I do one more reckless thing." Claire blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" And then she saw it. A small velvet box. Her heart stopped. "Nathan!" He dropped to one knee. In the middle of the airport, with all those watching eyes, and none of it staged. "I already married you once," he said with a grin. "But that wasn't the right way." Claire's eyes welled with tears. "Now I want to do it again. For real. No contracts. No reasons. No games." He looked up at her, his voice steady and true. "Claire Bennett, will you marry me for love?" And without hesitation, not even for a second, she smiled. Yes. Applause broke out around them. Strangers cheered, cameras clicked. But Claire saw no one, only him. Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger, and before she could even speak, he kissed her again deeply, completely, without fear. This time, it wasn't the beginning of a lie. It was the start of something real. 2 weeks later, Claire's heart began to race. She stepped out of the room, her dress flowing softly around her, and found her path lined with white petals and the glow of candlelight. The garden was the same, but everything had changed. Because this time, it wasn't make-believe. It was real. At the end of the aisle, Nathan waited, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. He stood still, eyes shining with emotion, watching her every step. Claire couldn't look away. When she finally reached him, he gently took her hands. "You look absolutely stunning," he whispered. She smiled. "You're not too bad yourself." The ceremony began. the officiant's voice carrying through the evening air. But Claire barely heard the words. Her heart was pounding so hard that everything else faded into the background. And then, Nathan began to speak. "Claire," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You walked into my life like a storm. And before I could understand what was happening, I was already caught in the center of it." Claire blinked, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "You taught me that love doesn't need to follow a plan. It doesn't have to be neat or logical. It just is, and I wouldn't want it any other way. Because I wouldn't want anyone but you." Her breath caught. Then it was her turn. She drew in a deep breath and spoke from the heart. "Nathan, I spent so long running from love. I thought I had to choose between success and emotion. I thought I had to guard my heart just to survive." She paused, smiling through tears. "But then you showed me. I didn't have to choose. That I could have it all. That I deserved it all. And I want all of it with you." Nathan's eyes glistened. The officiant gave a gentle nod. "Nathan Cole, do you take Claire Bennett as your lawful wife?" Without a second's pause, he replied, "I do." "And you, Claire Bennett, do you take Nathan Cole as your lawful husband?" Claire smiled, radiant, sure, at peace. "I do." The moment hung in the air. Then, the words they'd both waited to hear. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." But Nathan didn't wait. Before the officiant could say another word, he pulled Claire into a kiss, deep, full of everything they had been holding back. The guests cheered. Applause rang out. But to Claire, there was no one else in the world. Just him. Just this. And in that moment, she knew. She had never been happier. Love had come in a way she never expected. But in the end, it was exactly what she had always needed. Sometimes, love doesn't arrive the way we expect it to. It doesn't wait for the perfect timing. It doesn't come with certainty or logic. It simply walks into our lives, turns everything upside down, and somehow makes it all right. Claire and Nathan's journey began with a lie, a desperate choice to protect a future. But somewhere along the way, that lie became the very thing that taught them what truth feels like. Love isn't always planned. It's not always easy. But when it's real, you'll know. And when it's right, you won't have to run. What part of their story moved you the most? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more emotional, inspiring stories to life. And don't forget to turn on the bell icon so you never miss a moment that might change the way you see love. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep believing in stories that heal.